Hey folks, Matt from artoftheimage.com. We've been discussing the Canon G1X Mark III, and we've had some interesting feedback on our video labeled Interesting Reactions and Feedback. So I did a video about that, discussing some of the most interesting reactions and feedback at that point, and we've had some further interesting feedback. Tiger RV Traveler, YouTube username, writes in and says, the 4K question. Sony has 4K that works for around 30 minutes. Is that really working? Sony 1080 is not the best. What is the price of the Sony RX100 V? What is the price of Sony's fixed lens full frame? The only negative I see is price. I wonder if all the folks who are yearning for 4K own a 4K television. The major television studios broadcast in 1080, ABC broadcast in 720. Would I like 4K? Yes, but for a second camera, shots from one camera, would I like 4K? Yes, but for a second camera, shots from one camera, just my thoughts. So, interesting points he's making here. The 30 minutes, that's a good question actually, not a point, but Sony has 4K that works for around 30 minutes. Is that really working? And that's, I think you can look at that two ways. You could look at it that way, certainly, that hey, it only works for 30 minutes. It's not really working 4K. Or you could look at it that, hey, you get 30 minutes of 4K. I mean, some cameras have time limitations on them, and 30 minutes you can do a lot with before it shuts off. I would say, yeah, it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I can work within that. You just need to know when you can start and stop the camera again. It might be a little tricky if you're trying to film an event that goes on past that, and then you're going to miss part of it. You might need to run two cameras or something. But in general, I know for my shooting needs, I can certainly work around that. It's not an issue. However, I do see your point, especially like I said, for if you're shooting events that go on for longer than that, you don't want to be starting and stopping cameras, nor do you want to be dealing with potential overheating. So it's an interesting point. And then you're saying that Sony 1080 is not the best. I haven't really seen that to be an issue, but I'm not going to argue the point because I've been doing 4K now for so long. I couldn't really. I'd have to go back and look at it. And then price. I mean, that's what you said. The only negative is price. This camera is quite highly priced. And so that, anything at the right price becomes a value. But what we're getting here at this price, is it a value? I don't think so. And I think that's what you're kind of agreeing with there when we look at that. Some of the other interesting comments we had, you could buy a new Nikon D7200 and 50 f1.8 for this price and build your lenses from there. Bass Angler 73 wrote in with that one. And that's a good point we talked about too. There's a lot of other options at this price point, and I think that's what's going to make this a very hard sell for Canon in the G1X Mark III at this price, is that you can get a lot of other potentially much better options for this price point. Mod Riz writes in, I hope I'm saying that right, YouTube username, less than this price of the G1X Mark III, we can purchase a Samsung NX500. I use Samsung NX500 with a 16-50 lens and a 30f2 pancake. Very compact, has excellent 4K in crop mode, excellent dynamic range, 14 stops, DxO marks 87. Best DxO marks for APS-C sensor. I'm not sure if that's correct, but we'll leave that for now. Better image quality than G1X Mark III. Great travel camera, very much portable, excellent video quality in full HD 60p, 120 frames a second in 720, touch tilt selfie screen, 28 megapixel back side illuminated BSI sensor. So again, Mod's pointing out here that Samsung NX500 is an option at a less price, and in a lot of ways a much better option as far as what you're getting and what it's able to do than what the G1X Mark III is at that price. Mr. Kochi71 writes in, not a video guy, but you would think this would have 4K. Definitely at this price tag. And again, that comes back down to the price. They're pricing it way out of the ballpark for what they're offering us here. Slow lens, no 4K. Two biggies for me on why it shouldn't be this price. Sully Cortez writes in and says, this is an even bigger freaking joke than the 6D Mark II was. Are you freaking kidding, Canon? Holy. At this price tag, you're only going to drive people to the competition. This compact camera doesn't even come close to the RX series spec-wise. The only nice thing is that it's an APS-C sensor, but that is almost negated by the crappy lens. And I've substituted out what he said, so obviously he doesn't like the lens. Dude, who that is driving the ship at Canon? Seriously, they are morons and really need a permanent vacation. So Sully's not holding back here. And you know what? For the most part, I agree with Sully here. This lens is not well spec'd as far as the speed of it. If you're going to give us this slow a lens, give us a much longer range. And then all the other failings, namely 4K, like this is just way too expensive just to be saying you should pay this kind of money because it's an APS-C sensor camera. It's too much money just for that reason. And then George Martinez says suckers will buy this garbage. So basically agreeing with Sully. Then we have Kyoshin Supreme, YouTube username. I would pay $1,000 if it has 4K, or I wouldn't buy it. People keep saying they don't need 4K, but you're spending over $1,000, and in 2 years or more, you will lose value if you want to sell the camera. I will not buy a camera without 4K now, and especially 2 years later. I have many ways to shoot and usages of 4K. So that's a good point too, and that's what I've said before. Even if you yourself are not wanting 4K, to buy something that is under spec right now. In other words, car without air conditioning. You may not have a problem with that, but it's going to be very hard on resale. Again, you go to resell this camera, it's going to be very hard to sell it in comparison to what else is available at a same or lower price point with 4K, because a lot of people are going to want it. Plus, don't undercut the value of 4K. You're going to find some really good uses for it, even if it's just extracting stills from video. That's very valuable. Then you can process in, and there's just so much you can do with 4K. Don't undercut that. Jeremy Red writes in and says, just get a Sony a6500. Problem solved. So, again, an option for, you could probably get an A65 body only for right about that price. You still need some lenses, but Big's got a good point. Very highly spec camera for close to that price range. Ed D writes in, hard to design a longer lens with an APS-C sensor. We will have to wait for an in-depth review versus the competition to really judge this camera fairly. Specs aren't everything. And you know what? Ed has a point here. Until we get it in our hands and play with it, it is hard to judge this camera fairly, but sometimes you just know coming right out the gate without even getting it in your hands that it's so under-spec that you're not even interested in it. And I think that's the problem Canon's facing here, that for the price and the underwhelming specs, this is going to be a bit of a lame duck. I don't know that this is going to get out of the gate. I'm really not sure how many of these they're going to sell. But what do you guys think? We've had a fair bit of feedback now. We've had some more in this video. Some interesting points. You know, the thing about Sony and the 4K, the different things you could buy for the money. What's your overall thoughts on the Canon G1X Mark III? Has our discussion changed your opinion of it? Were you interested to begin with, and then you went, nah, geez, you know what, I'm not. Were you not interested in it, and there's been some points made that makes you think you are interested, or are you like Ed, you're waiting to actually shoot one to see what you think? Again, I don't think it's bad to be underwhelmed with the specs and not interested, but it's always good to take a fair shot at it, although, honestly, I'm not all that excited to try this camera. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Let's continue to discuss it. I was very excited initially because I do like the APS-C compact ultra zoom cameras. It isn't really an ultra zoom though, and there's no 4K, so it's kind of lost its interest for me. But I want to know what you guys have to say. So thanks for all your feedback, folks, here. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon here at artoftheimage.com.